All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with Kathy Duva and Joe Rotonda of Main Events. How are you all doing?
Awesome.
Doing great.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
good to see you.
It is going to be an eventful week for you all. Excuse me. It's going to be an eventful several weeks for you all between Dmitry Bivol fighting on October 12th, Bakhram Murtazaliev fighting on October 19th, and I believe Carlos Jackson is fighting as well.
Right, he'll be on the undercard of Bakhram Zoo.
So let's talk about this. Kathy, I know that Dmitry Bivol, he's not signed with Main Events, but you advise him informally, formally?
Formally, yeah.
Formally. So he's got this huge fight coming up against Artur Beterbiev. How long has this been, if not in the works, at least in mind?
Oh God, on our side forever. That's a fight. I know everybody thinks Dimitri's, going to be in trouble and everything, and I've always been of the opinion that this would be a fight that Dmitry will stun everyone with. I just have such confidence in him. So on our side, it's a fight we wanted that we hadn't been able to make, but that fortunately, it was a tough fight to make because you have two guys who are from both born in Russia, don't have big followings, anywhere as a result of it. So it's just it's wonderful that it came together and that there was enough money to pay for it.
Where does the confidence in Dmitry Bivol come from? Is it confidence in Dmitry? Is it something that you see or don't see in Beterbiev, or a combination of both?
I think it's okay. So in Dmitry, you've got a guy who has seemed to have no ego, who is a great learner, who has paid attention and learned everything he needs to know, is afraid of nothing, is immensely talented, and has always just been about, I want the biggest, the toughest fight you can get me. Has literally, over the time I've worked with him, turned down fights for big money or said, nah, I don't want to do that. For example, when there was talk about a rematch with Canelo, and his response was, I'd really rather have a bigger challenge than that. I mean, he beat him easily. Some people seem to have forgotten, but that's Dimitri's mindset. That was Pernell Whitaker's mindset. I mean, remember him having arguments with my late husband about, Dan say, I got you a breather, I got you an easy one. And he's going, no, I don't want an easy fight. I want a tough fight. Dimitri's the same exact way. In fact, the two of them met each other. I was happy to be able to introduce them to each other one day. And there's just something in my mind, what I've learned over the way too many years I've been around the sport is, in the end, no matter how talented you are, when you get to that gut check moment, when you get to that fight that's going to be the toughest of your career, you've got to have something inside you that's different than everybody else. And I see that in Dmitry. I saw that. I learned that in Pernell Whitaker. I learned that working with Ray Leonard, years ago when he fought Hearns. There are some guys that are just different, and Dmitry is one of those guys.
It's amazing that he sees or saw the Canelo fight as being easy, and he made it look incredibly much easier than anybody else has made a Canelo fight look since Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, I've seen all these things. I was looking at something yesterday online about all the opponents that Canelo fought and how he blew them all away, and it's like one guy missing. Nobody had his name on the list. Like they just forgot the fight happened. Nothing against Canelo. It's just that Dmitry is truly that good. I don't know how else to explain it. That's it. He's that good. And you see in Beterbiev, the big puncher, yes, long periods of inactivity, severe injuries to his shoulder, whatever. Not getting any younger. He's not a young man. I just think Dimitri's got all of the tangibles in this fight. If you were putting Whitaker in with a big puncher, and you would look at it, and I told you all those things, that the guy's pushing 40 and he's been injured badly and he doesn't really not that active, and yeah, but he's a big puncher. You would have thought, well, this is going to be easy for Whitaker, and it would have been. And I feel the same way about, I won't say easy, but I because no fight is easy. But I think this guy, I think everybody's in for a big surprise. I think this guy's made for Dmitry.
Why is Beterbiev made for Dmitry? You mentioned the age, you mentioned the injuries and the inactivity. Is there something stylistically as well?
I think he depends, like most big punchers, on the punch. And I think if that's what you've got, um, as Lennox Lewis once said to me famously about David Tua, all he can do is punch. Easy, easy work. And again, I'm not going to say easy, but I think that ultimately he relies on the punching ability. I think if you look at their opponents that they face throughout their careers, I think Dmitry has fought far tougher opposition, far tougher opposition, much earlier in his career. I just think everybody's in love with Beterbiev because he comes in there and he's silent and he's the big puncher and he's got this great image. But I think in the end, I think the superior boxer and the guy who can take the best punch wins those fights. And so I've got my money on Dmitry on both counts.
It's interesting because when you think about boxer versus puncher matchups, people often tend to favor the puncher. But then I think about instances like Felix Trinidad taking on Winky Wright. I think Winky had a bit more of a size advantage there, which Dmitry won't have against Beterbiev, but people might be discounting what a boxer can do to negate a puncher.
Yeah, a boxer can do a lot to negate a puncher. If he or she is at that level of excellence, and you have to be at that level to do it. It's not just any old boxer can beat any old puncher, but if you are a boxer who is as cerebral as Dmitry is, because he's very cerebral. He's playing chess the whole time he's in the ring. Again, I compare him to Whitaker, same thing. I think that guy, if he is cerebral and fearless, and again, willing to put it all on the line as Dmitry always is, I think that guy's got the advantage. I remember watching Leonard Hearns, and Don Dumpy was the announcer, and we got about, I don't remember what round it was, probably after the 12th round, and he just said, everybody came in here thinking Hearns was going to beat Whitaker because he's Hearns was going to be Leonard because he's such a big puncher. He said, but the truth is Leonard takes the better punch. And that is really the defining characteristic in the end in these fights. Not who hits harder. It's who takes the punch better.
I guess the second to last question on this fight before I move on to other topics, but you've said several times about the ability to take a punch. Has Dmitry Bivol fought puncher anywhere near what Beterbiev's power is?
Well, I think you can. Canelo's top of that list. I think you could compare it. He went 12 strong with Canelo in what was probably a shutout. If that's not comparison enough, and even going back to Bivol's earlier years, and this isn't a credit to how well those wins aged. Like he beat Joe Smith, shut him out, right, on HBO early in his career. Joe Smith later became world champion. Jean Pascal, shut him out. Again, I think that was HBO as well. Pascal even ended up bouncing back, becoming world champion. Pascal was a strong fighter too. Tough guy to look good against. I think Bivol's seen different variations of Beterbiev, and I don't think Beterbiev's seen anything close to a Bivol. And I'm not knocking Beterbiev. He's a freak. He's just the inactivity throughout his career, and I think Bivol is to me, outside of maybe Usyk, he's the baddest man on the planet.
And also, when you talk about taking the better punch, I'm not just talking about like the ability to get hit in the head and take it, or hit in the body and take it. I'm talking part of taking the better punch is rolling with it and not actually taking anything flush. And that's, again, where the boxer has a big advantage over the guy who's a pure puncher.
I think these are very good points. You'd mentioned the inability for this fight to come to fruition, and now we've had the financing come in and push it over the finish line. What was it that pushed it over the finish line? Was it Riyadh season?
Oh, obviously, yeah. Because you don't have a big entity like HBO anymore. That would have maybe put up money for a fight like this, and I don't even know they could have afforded it. They could have back in the day, but not in toward the end of HBO's boxing adventure. There wasn't, and it's not a pay-per-view fight by any means. If you're relying strictly on pay-per-view sales for this fight, you'd get killed. And it's a shame because it's an amazing fight, but the reality of a pay-per-view is either you've got to have a really big bankroll to back it up, or you've got to have a match between two stars. And while these two certainly should be and deserve to be stars, it is just the nature of their careers that unfortunately they while they both fought on HBO, they didn't reach the very, it was right at the end of HBO. Dmitry, and the next to last fight that they ever had on HBO had Dmitry in it. He was just breaking out into the main event at that point. He wasn't there long enough to become a big star.
Was the affiliations, Dmitry being featured mostly on DAZN and Artur being on Top Rank and being on ESPN, did that also prevent this fight from being made over recent years?
I really don't know. I mean, I think in the end, I think a fight like this in the end is that it's really the finances. At what point are the promoters of the two fighters willing to, risk the one of them's going to lose? And I think at this point, as I said, I think Beterbiev's on the back end of his career at this point. I'm not sure Dmitry is. I just think that they're both being, let's put it this way, they're both being extraordinarily well compensated, and good for them because they deserve it.
I agree. Thank you. So you're going to be racking up some frequent flyer miles, going all the way to Riyadh for the fight on the 12th, right? And then back.
No, I'm going to be watching that one from home. I was there. They invited me, but I have my daughter's birthday and some other things that are in the way, and I'm just an advisor. They don't need to do that.
But you will be in Orlando for Bakhram's fight on the 19th.
Yes.
I know that you and I spoke about this a little bit back, but you are very confident. You're both very confident that Bakhram will have a stand-up performance and really announce himself when he fights Tim Tszyu on October 19th. Why is that?
Yeah, you take that one again.
I'm even more confident that this is a badass fight. Like if you look at Tszyu's last performance, Bakhram's last performance where he won the title, like both these guys are willing to go to war, and they're probably going to have to in this one. I think. Also, I think if there's ever a time to catch a fighter, it's after a fight like Tszyu just had with Fundora, right? Plus, Tszyu's, he's not fighting in front of his home crowd, nor is Bakhram. It's a healthy, neutral ground. I think Bakhram wants it that much more, but it's a good fight. It's a great fight.
Stylistically, how do you see this fight playing out?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Bakhram's confident. He has power. Bakhram's kind of unorthodox in there too. If you watch him, like his movements are kind of like you're almost leaves you unbalanced a bit. Tszyu's a pretty underrated counter puncher. I think at some point, maybe after the first or second round, these guys start throwing it around in there, and we have a little bit of a war. And we'll see. At that point, we'll see who wants it more. And the thing with Tszyu too is like, is he seasoned? Is he ready for another war like he just had with Fundora? Maybe he is. I'm not saying he isn't. It's just some of those fights he just had with Fundora. Those could be a career killer. Like you never know who bounces back from those and who doesn't. I think going in, I'd like to think Bakhram's the fresher of the two, just based off that. But we'll see.
And Bakhram's bigger.
Yeah, no, Bakhram's bigger. He's got a height advantage, and we shall see. It's a good one.
This is the first fight back for Tszyu since that Fundora fight. He wanted to fight Virgil Ortiz, and the cut hadn't healed. How much can you take from the Fundora fight, or is it hard to really take too much from it, given how that fight was affected, in my eyes at least, by all that blood gushing down Tszyu's face?
So I think with the Fundora fight, what you take away from that regarding Tszyu is that Tszyu's a tough motherfucker. Like there's guys that would have folded. That I could fit my thumb all the way in that cut. Like Tszyu's tough, and I don't think people were giving him that credit just because like he's the son of a Hall of Fame fighter, and maybe the upbringing wasn't as um, badass as someone as a backroom, or wasn't as tough, or who knows. But when you left that fight, you knew Tszyu was real, and he's here to stay. He wants it just as bad as some of these other guys too. So it's almost like I don't want to compare the kid to fucking Jake Paul, but at some point we start believing like, all right, Jake Paul's here and he's taking this serious and he really wants to do this regardless of what his bank account looks like. Like, he wants to be known and viewed as a real boxer. And I think after the Fundora fight, you have to view Tszyu in a similar category where he's not going anywhere. He's here to be world champion and he wants it just as bad as the next guy. Like, he dug deep in that one, you know?
The other thing you can take from it is that the reason why he was busted up like that was because it seemed that Fundora could not miss him with his jab.
Right.
And so I'm hoping that's what Bakhram takes from it.
But I give Tszyu credit, because I've been following Tszyu since he was the 6-round fighter out in Australia, and I didn't see this coming, right? Like, where he's at now, I didn't see that coming. So credit to that kid. Like, he's gotten the Tony Harrison fight. There were fights where I didn't think he'd do as well as he did, and he did. So good for him.
You're holding Tszyu in high esteem. People who are listening to this might be more familiar with Tszyu and maybe not as familiar with Bakhram. So for people who don't know about Bakhram, you both have an eye for talent. What is it that people should know about him?
Bakhram, you know what I dig with Bakhram, and I dig it in like the MMA world too, is the guys that really do this for the title. Guys that don't give a fuck about money, right? Bakhram's that guy. Bakhram's a glory first guy. He's in this for the title. It's not, I'm going to get the new Lamborghini, or fucking, how do I build my Instagram following? It's just the title. That's it. And I dig that, because those are real guys. Those are guys you want to get behind as a promoter. Guys that really will fight anyone and do whatever it takes to get to the title. Because sometimes you think the value of the title just isn't what it was, right? And Bakhram's complete opposite.
Bakhram had the title win earlier this year over Cole K. Is this Tszyu fight a step up? Is this the toughest fight of Bakhram's career so far?
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it should be. It would almost be it would be disrespectful to Tszyu to say it wasn't. Like, this is probably the toughest fight.
Certainly on paper.
Yeah, definitely. This is the toughest fight. The last one was tough. Don't get me wrong. Like, going all the way to fucking Germany to fight their hero and Jack K. And if you watch the fight, you see Jack K knew like this was his last shot at the title, and he fought like it. That kid fought so fucking hard, but so did Bakhram. And that was a tough fight. This one, being that you're fighting someone a little younger than you, and from what we saw with the Fundora fight, a guy who may want it just as bad as you. Yeah, I think it's his toughest fight.
In Bakhram, we've got a guy who like grew up during the Chechen War. We see things on TV now about the poor children that are caught in these places like Ukraine and Syria and Gaza. That was his upbringing. Trying to imagine that. And here he is, and he has achieved his goal of being a world champion, and now he wants to hold the title for a while, and then I would assume move up to middleweight, because he's awfully big for a junior middleweight. But the guy still has, he's reached his initial goal. He still has goals. And watching him with Cole K, I was there for that one. It was life and death as far as he was concerned. This was it. He had to win this fight. There were opportunities he turned down for more money that didn't have a title attached. And it was, no, I want that title fight. That's what I want. That's my goal right now. And he got it. So as Joe says, he did not have a comfortable upbringing. He's not wealthy. He didn't have anything handed to him in his entire life. And he's willing to work hard for what he gets. And I just believe he's going to meet the moment.
And there are even more opportunities that would be open for Bakhram if he beats Tszyu. Obviously, he would still have the IBF title, but he'd also have a big name on his record.
Oh, yeah.
What are you hoping happens for Bakhram if he defeats Tszyu on October 12th? And with that in mind, you mentioned a potential move to middleweight. Seems like there's much more available at 154 right now than there is at 160.
Well, yeah, he'd have to beat Terrence Crawford first, and then when he went up to 160, he'd be the man. He'll make the division. Don't worry about that. Let me worry about the marketing. No, I mean that's obviously he's in a great division. There are terrific fights for him in it, and yeah, the number one would be, of course, Terrence Crawford.
I mean, you've got Crawford, you've got Madrimov, you've got Virgil Ortiz, you've got Charles Conwell. If Jermell Charlo comes back to 154, Sergey Boachuk, there's a lot of fights that could be made.
That it's stacked right now, 54. Yeah.
So he's got a terrific future.
Why is Crawford at the top of your list, or is it also at the top of Bakhram's list?
Well, honestly, if Bakhram wins, it's probably at the top of Crawford's list too. If he wants all those titles, I mean, and if that kid wants it, we'll want it just as bad. You know.
And he made sacrifices to get to those titles, and when you get an opportunity like that for that much money, you know, coming off would have been two big wins for him, and fighting a guy who's again on the back end of his career. You're not going to get too many opportunities to fight Terrence Crawford. If it comes his way, of course, this guy who just wants the biggest challenge all the time, of course, that's what he'd want to do.
Yes, and we both know that Crawford would be a big challenge. I didn't even mention Sebastian Fundora. We were talking about earlier,
right?
Who they might fight together. And given the fact that this fight for Bakhram is with premier boxing champions and Fundora and Spencer as well, seems like that is an option if the Crawford fight couldn't be made.
Most definitely. Yeah, he's a free agent. He can go where he wants.
So you mentioned at the start of our conversation on the undercard that Carlos Jackson, one of your recent signees, will be appearing on the undercard. For people who aren't familiar with Jackson, who is he and what is it about him that appealed to you to sign him to the main events roster?
So I look at Carlos as like a guy who flew under the radar. Like a year ago, there was fucking free agents everywhere, promotional free agents. Now there's not. And Carlos is one of those guys I think people missed the boat on. He's a big puncher at 122. He took some time off, came back earlier this year, and yeah, I like him. He wants to fight everybody, and he wants a Nui at some point, which that's the shit I love because no one's fucking falling out of Nui. No one wants to go near Japan for the next couple of years. You know, everyone's trying to stay here and fight. I don't know. Whoever the fuck next in line is, that's not a Nui. You know? So I love it. And we'll see. We'll see what he looks like later this month, too. He's fighting a kid, Carlos Carlson, a tough Spanish kid, fought on Fight Pass recently. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what he looks like. I think we'll be impressed, though.
This fight will be at 122 or 126?
No, so it's actually going to be 124. Yeah, but he'll stay at 122. Okay. Carlos.
You know, for people who aren't familiar with Carlos's record, he is 20-1 with 13 knockouts. It looks like he's from Atlanta, and Carlos has won 4 in a row since his loss to Enrique Vivas in 2020. I don't know if you watched the fight with Vivas. I know that I haven't, but if you have, how have you seen Carlos improve since his sole defeat?
And I think that fight was a little heavy for him too. Yeah, I think he moved up for that fight. He probably shouldn't have. He was a little undersized. Well, I'm sorry. What was your question?
Just how has he improved since that fight? You know, so you did mention, yes, that fight was at featherweight, and afterward, 3 of Carlos's 4 fights have been at or around 123.
Right. So I mean, he switched his whole surroundings up. So he was in Georgia, and now he just went out to California to hold camp out there, and he's going to get a new trainer out there too. I think he was with like his coach from way back when, and he decided to switch it up to try to evolve the game a little bit. So he's taking his career serious, which I think he always did. It's just about taking it to the next level now because he's right there. He's the right win away from breaking back into the top 10. At one point, I think he was eight in one of the governing bodies, and the inactivity obviously drew him out. But yeah, I think he's the right win away from breaking back into that top 10, and yeah, hopefully be able to move him.
Anything else that you want to say about Carlos before we move on?
No, I'm excited. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, me too.
Main events has been influential in boxing for more than 4 decades now. Given your experience and your perspective that you have, how is boxing in your eyes right now? Is it changing for the better? Is it struggling right now?
Oh, it's struggling, yes, very much so. Aside from a few guys at the top who are making a tremendous amount of money, and God bless them that they are. No, there's no regular outlet um, where grassroots promoters can go and put their fights on. You're not going to grow this sport without a grassroots. There's no, for many years, there's been no like middle class for boxing. That goes back, that goes back to what I would say the late 90s, that started to disappear. So that's been a handicap. The sport is that has started to degrade the sport. It took 20 odd years for that to really get there. But now we're at a place where if you're a grassroots promoter and you're willing to lose money and build up a fighter, you almost have nowhere to take him unless you go to one or two or three, well-positioned promoters and turn them over to them. So it's very discouraging.
How does that situation affect boxing in general? And how does that then be to the detriment of what boxing fans hope to see?
Well, for one, if you don't have if you don't have a lively development series, and now we've lost Showbox. When years ago when HBO started Boxing After Dark, it was actually a development series. That was the plan. You had a way to, if you were a promoter, you would have, if you could build up a guy, you could bring him somewhere. You could bring him to Showtime. You could bring him to HBO. There was a way in. It wasn't easy, but there was a way in. If you could get a guy who was good enough, you could bring him there. Now there's nowhere to bring him. And so there's no incentive for a promoter to go out and lose a lot of money trying to build up fighters. We made, historically, not just main events, every promoter out there make all their money on one or two guys. And then everything else would be plowed back into trying to find another one of those one or two guys that's going to carry. Now it's almost impossible. You've got to, if you're going to build a fighter, you have to be able to choose his opposition, because you need to teach that fighter in some instances how to fight how to fight a guy who's going to come right at him, how to fight a guy who's going to run, how to fight a guy who's going to fight from left-handed, how all the various things that a fighter's going to run into in his career. He should first run into, he or she, I should say now, should run into those things for the first time in a development fight, not in a world title fight. That's how you learn. That's how you get better. You have to learn how to finish an opponent, which is not, you see, you can go back to Lomachenko coming out of the amateurs and losing his first pro fight. Is he hadn't learned the skills that he needed to be able to get a guy in trouble and finish him. It takes a lot of time, and if the only options you have as you're developing a fighter is to take him to another promoter's card and be chosen by that other promoter as the opponent for his or her fighter, then you're really you're not able to develop the fighter the way you have to in order to make that fighter succeed. So the less opportunity there is, the fewer fighters there's going to be. The fewer fighters there are going to be, the fewer fights there are for people to watch. Fewer opportunities for someone to become a fan. And right now you've got a bunch of guys who came up in the last 20 years, 10, 15 years, making a boatload of money with Riyadh season shows. And again, God bless them all. They all deserve it. But I don't know where they're going to get the next group of those guys.
It's been eventful in a negative way in recent years, where we've lost HBO, as you mentioned. We've lost Showtime. Those were the two heavyweights of boxing with tremendous history, great fights, and a lot of money that they pumped into the sport. And now we have DAZN, which is largely working with Golden Boy, Matchroom, and some smaller promoters, ESPN with Top Rank, and they air some overseas cards, and Premier Boxing Champions with Amazon Prime. How does main events, or how can main events fit into the current picture given the current alignments?
That's the question we ask ourselves every day here. We're working on things, and I can't tell you what they are because they'll blow up. Because, it's a dog-eat-dog business. We're still working very hard at trying to find our place, and we have this dogged optimism that we will. It's never been easy. I remember my late husband died in 1996, and I remember him telling me years before he died that boxing is dying, and that if we don't get our own series, we're going to go out of business. It was, prior to that, we had fights on USA Network for a long time. And since certainly his passing, and since the time that I've been involved in this, started trying to run the company, finding a series has been my goal. We hit it a couple times. We had a great run with NBC. I've had some runs with ESPN. We find it somehow. We find it. So we're gonna figure it out. We keep feeling like things are changing. There's a lot going on. There are other players that are starting to get interested. We've got good relationships with a lot of them. So we're just gonna keep plugging away till somebody recognizes that we do a really good job at what we do, and they should want to work with us.
And so the hope is to land a series because you would have regular dates, regular money, regular opportunities for your fighters.
Oh yeah, that's. I don't know how you develop talent any other way, unless you're just you just got money to burn and you're willing to throw it, which I don't have that kind of money.
I mentioned DAZN earlier, and I know that Dmitry Bivol, Overtime Boxing, Red Owl, some of these smaller promoters that don't have the pedigree that Main Events does are working with the network, with the streamer. Are they, in your perspective, are they losing money, or is this the kind of thing that might also be good for Main Events?
I think that, it's not like we haven't tried to go to those same places. They were chosen, and I don't know why. Not against any of them, but we just, are they losing money? I only know what it would take for me to break even. I don't know if other people have other better ideas of how to make money than I do. I don't know, but it's nice to see that some smaller promoters are getting opportunities. Yes, because we would like to get some of those opportunities, and we are trying very hard to get them.
And I think we will. At some point, I think we will. That's the goal. And from where I'm sitting, I'm not stopping. We're going to find something at some point. That it just has to make sense, and it will. This past year, we've met with anyone and everyone in the business that means something at all, and we have good relations across the board. I've nothing bad to say about PBC. I actually think PBC is fantastic. I love Pro Box. I think they have the best development series out now. Pro Box is a killer. 2 Wednesdays a month, and all the fights are 50-50. I love that shit. So good for those guys. But for the current state, I think because of that, we fit. We have good relationships across the board.
And we are working with those people. Obviously,
Yeah.
We've been working very well with the people at PBC. And Joe has, as I said, he has a great relationship with Pro Box people. And you know what? By hook or by crook, we somehow figure out a way to do it. We're still here.
I spoke with both of you earlier this year. Kathy, I remember speaking with you, and it felt like you were in a bit of a catch-22 situation. You were talking about the number of fighters and managers who'd come to you and wanted to work with you, but you were reticent because you didn't want to bring them on unless you could do what you felt was the responsible job of providing them the dates that they deserve in order to grow and thrive. And yet, to get some of those potential dates with networks, you need a larger stable, the catch-22. And Joe, when you and I spoke the other month, I think you mentioned that maybe there's been a bit of a paradigm shift or a perspective change with Main Events, that now you are looking to get more fighters, and Carlos is the beginning of that?
Yeah, so and I think Kathy agrees. Like I'm not into signing fucking 60 guys and having nowhere to put them. And I know that's a thing. I know a ton of these guys go out and they sign all these fighters, and there's no way to honor those deals. I don't want to be so busy for the wrong reasons, to where I have managers calling me every day. Why is my guy inactive? You know. So if I can guarantee that I can keep you busy, we'll bring you on. I'll sign if any, and especially if you actually want to fight, you want to fight anyone and figure out whether you can fight or not, and we can figure that out too for you. Then yeah, I'd love to sign them. You know, I can't go out and sign everyone and anyone and not be able to guarantee to keep them busy.
Carlos is the start of that.
Yeah.
We've figured out some ways where we could bring people on. We're not well situated to sign a guy who's turning pro.
Sure.
Because you need shows to do that. You need to keep them active. But to get to the people like Carlos Jackson who are at a crossroads in their career, I think we're well positioned to help them. So that's what we're going to do.
And these guys that you're bringing on, it's again back in that situation where they're likely to end up on another promoter's show as the B side. But your hope is they can score that upset and build that into bigger things. I think that kind of reminds me of what you did with Sergey Kovalev all those years ago.
Yeah, but I had the NBC series. Remember, it didn't take very long, to get him to where he wasn't fighting on NBC anymore. But he was special. The nice thing about having the series is that you could do what we did with Sergey Kovalev. You sign a guy based on, oh, I'm going to put you in a tough fight on one of my shows. I'm going to see how you fight, and then we decide if I'm going to sign you, which is what we did. And you take one look at him and go, oh, there he is. I've been waiting for him. And then it was easy. But we're looking for our company has. If you go back to past the start of it, where we were, signing up blue chip Olympic fighters back in the 80s. From the let's say the end of the 90s on, after my husband passed, we were not able to sign those people. They just weren't going to come to me. They weren't coming to main events for a host of reasons. But we were not in a position to go out and get the Miguel Cottos of the world at that point. So what we did was we went out and we signed a lot. And even when my husband was alive, we did this. We signed a lot of fighters from foreign countries. And he would work well as we did with their promoters in those foreign countries, and that's kind of where Lennox Lewis came from. I mean, he was a blue chip fighter, but he was from a foreign country. We signed David Tua out of the Olympics in '92. We were there and saw him fight and said, "Oh wow, this guy's a fun fighter. Let's get him." Arturo Gatti. This is not American. You can go all the way back. There's been so many fighters that we've worked with. Andrew Galata, Tomas Ademic, whatever. It's from foreign countries. There are people that, and then like Sergey and Bivol, who came here and needed someone to believe in them. And so that's kind of, I think, that's our niche. That's what we're good at. And they don't have to be from foreign countries, but as Joe says, they have to be the people that have been overlooked for one reason or another. When I signed Sergey, I was told by an executive at HBO that you've only got two problems with this guy. One, he's a light heavyweight and nobody cares about the light heavyweights. And the other one is that he's Russian. And I just, okay. And I had been told by the same executive years earlier, we're not going to put Ademic on as the A side because, he's Polish. And even though he's from Poland, and even though he sells out, arenas in Newark, well, that's just in Newark. He's like the Grateful Dead. They also told me that about Gatti at one point. He's like the Grateful Dead. He's just got the same fans that come back. He doesn't have any other fans. And we ran up against that over and over and over again for years. So I guess my point is that if you tell me no, you're just going to make me come back at you harder until I get the yes.
The other thing, to follow up with the B-side thing, so Carlos isn't going to be the B side like October 19th. He's not going against the PBC guy. And the other thing, if Carlos gets past October 19th and we can go that Pro Box route, there is no B side of Pro Box. Pro Box is 50-50, and the only difference is the color of your fucking corner pads. Like there is no B side in that outlet, which I love. So like to be here doesn't mean you have to be the B side until it's time to fight for the title, which you will be the challenger, sure. But before that and outside of that, there really is no A side, B side. At least in the avenues I want to take with guys, you know.
And Joe is he's worked this out and come up with a plan, and I'm really happy with it. So we're gonna pursue it. And Carlos is the beginning of the experiment.
It's maddening that you were told that guys like Adamek or Sergey Kovalev were foreign, because it feels like this is not a new idea that talent and entertainment are universal. I mean, I'm just thinking of three recent names, and of course these are like the top tier, but like Naoya Inoue, Manny Pacquiao's English wasn't great. Miguel Cotto, when he turned pro, he was largely speaking Spanish and then picked up English. Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin. These are all fighters who, like Sergey, came in, scored victories, and then convinced the networks. And it's just weird that, weird but not surprising that the networks keep on withholding their opinion until they see the guys in the ring on their air.
Right.
And even then, when Adamek beat Chris Arreola, I remember Russell Peltz coming up to him when the fight was over and said, "Well, I guess you got this win now. You can have your way with HBO." And I said, "Mark my words, Chris Arreola will fight on HBO on the A side again before Tomas Adamek does," and he did. It was frustrating as could be. The only way to get him on HBO was to put him in a fight that that they thought he'd lose, and yet he had this string of fabulous fights in Newark, New Jersey, and selling out Prudential Center and bringing this huge legion of fans and all this fun. And I mean, literally brought HBO executives to those fights and said, "Look at this. Everybody's Polish tonight." The whole place was wearing red and white scarves around their necks and shouting, for Adamek. And yeah, but he doesn't have any appeal beyond the Polish community. And I'm like, and yet I'm looking at people wearing red and white scarves, and I know they're not all Polish. They came out because he's fun and they want to see him fight. But there's always some kind of prejudice, whatever it's going to be. The reason a company like Main Events at this point is able to get good fighters is because, fortunately, those prejudices still exist, and so we exploit them. And that's what we intend to continue to do.
I was at your show in Newark in August 2010 when Adamek fought Michael Grant, and just that atmosphere. When people ask me some of the greatest atmospheres that I've been fortunate to be ringside for, that was one of them, for the exact reasons that you expressed. And then the fights that Adamek had with Cunningham and Paul Briggs, just some of the great fights that he was in. So yes, you were able to exploit it, and boxing fans were able to benefit. I want to move on, if it's okay with y'all, and ask, what do you make of the involvement of Turki Alalshikh and Riyadh season? I feel like there are both pros and cons from my perspective, but I'm wondering what your perspectives are.
I agree there are pros and cons. The pro is obviously the fighters that are getting these opportunities are getting paid extraordinarily well, and I'm always in favor of that. There are cons. Well, this isn't just all of their fights are pay-per-view, it seems. That's a big con, because you've got to make fans, and you can't make fans if you're behind a paywall.
But I think he recently said they're getting rid of that, right? Like, isn't Beterbiev B-balls for free?
Well, that was because of Beterbiev's contractual agreement with ESPN, I believe, is why it's on ESPN Plus. We did see, at least in the United States, the Joshua Dubois fight was a $20 pay-per-view, which
right. Yeah.
I can't remember the last time there was a major pay-per-view that was that affordable.
Well, it wasn't a pay-per-view fight. I mean, I will confess that I saw it was on, and I was by myself, and I turned on my computer, and I put the fight on DAZN, and I saw I had to pay another $20, and I'm like, nah, I know how this fight's going, and I just didn't watch it because I'm like, yeah, it's by myself. I'm not going to pay to watch whatever. I mean, I'm not. We don't have heavyweight fighters right now. There's no reason why I'm supposed to be evaluating them. So I didn't pay. If you're a new fan, I've been a fan of boxing for almost 50 years. Okay, and I didn't pay. There are, if you're a new fan, somebody who's not seen boxing before, why would you pay for that? Does it make sense?
To hear Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren talk about it, and they were asked about this, I think we're talking on September 26th. They were asked about this yesterday during a press conference for the Beterbiev Bivol fight. They were saying that these fights, such as Joshua Dubois or Beterbiev Bivol, as you said earlier, would not be made if not for the Saudi money and some of these major fights that have been made. Is it a net positive for Saudi Arabia to be involved in boxing?
I think only they can evaluate that.
Well,
They know what they're
in your
spending.
eyes.
They know what they're after. I don't know. I mean, they're right. Those fights wouldn't have happened. I agree. They probably wouldn't have happened because you wouldn't have the financing for them. But that's a problem that, again, the entire boxing world has. If HBO and Showtime were still out there and competing, still had healthy budgets, those fights would have happened. The guys wouldn't have made as much money, but they would have happened. I don't. Again, you can take guys who are built up on HBO and Showtime and put them in the ring right now, and you can make it a pay-per-view, and you can put on a terrific fight. But the supply of HBO and Showtime fighters, they're into their 30s now. Some of them are in their 40s. I mean, the young fighters coming up, you can count on one hand. They're guys who get social media followings. They can survive. They're fighters who, I don't know who else there is. Some, one or two PBC young fighters have broken through, like Tank, who didn't have that HBO background, and again, Ryan Garcia, again, because of the social media following. There's a couple, but HBO's poster that they used to post every year with all their fighters, they used to have like 20 guys on there. There's not 20 guys that are young up and coming fighters that you could look at, and average people who are just sports fans would be able to name them. Not anymore. So again, I don't know what Riyadh season is after. If they're looking for short-term publicity in the boxing world, they're getting it. If they're looking for something else, if they're looking for something long-term, somebody's going to have to come up with a way to bring boxing to the masses where people can watch it and it's not behind a paywall.
I know that Riyadh season is obviously involved with the making of Bivol versus Beterbiev. Have you, as a company, had conversations with Riyadh season?
No, I have not.
Are you interested? Do you want to have those conversations?
I tried. Sergey Kovalev fought on the Usyk Fury card, so I was there. But I tried to get a meeting and I was not invited.
If we end up with the right guy, sure.
Yeah.
At that point, those are easy conversations to have, and maybe we will have the right guy, whether it's Bakhram or someone else down the line.
With Bivol, I'm just a consultant. I'm not the person going and making deals, so there would be no reason for me to meet them. But if we had a guy that, I think that if, as he says, if Bakhram wins and we're talking about a fight, well, yeah, I'm going to go to a meeting whether they invite me or not.
It's interesting some of the Riyadh season A sides turn out to be that you wouldn't expect. Like Mark Chamberlain before he lost this past weekend. Mark Chamberlain is a British I want to say a lightweight. He was a guy who was favored very much on these cards. So it seems like you could have some of these fighters that you're looking for who somehow catch Turki Alalshikh's eye, and then open up that relationship, open up that door for you.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Going back to what you were saying, Kathy, like what's in it for Riyadh season, you were talking about pay-per-view and not reaching the masses. It makes me wonder, I'm wondering your perspective, this is my last question about this. Is the goal for Riyadh season, in your perspective, to build up boxing, or is boxing an avenue for other goals for Turki Alalshikh?
I honestly don't have a clue. I mean, I don't know him. I've never spoken to him. I guess my impression is the guy's got a lot of money, is really a genuine fight fan, and he just wants to put the fights on because he likes to. So it's benefiting a lot of people, and I imagine he's got other goals or plans. I've heard stories about he might. He's certainly got enough money to do whatever he wants, at least until the money runs out. And while we know Saudi Arabia is not going to run out of money, it's really going to be a function of, whether the powers that be feel that whatever he's getting from this is what they want. And again, I don't know what they want. So I really am in no position to say.
Last question. You said that boxing is not for the better right now. Looking in the near future, whether it's 2 years down the line or 5 years down the line, and I feel like this is a job interview question now. Where do you see boxing in the United States and maybe worldwide being in 5 years?
It's either going to be like back to being big and exciting and wonderful, or it's going to be dead. I really don't know the answer, but again, back in the early 90s, my husband would have answered that question the same way. So somehow we managed to just keep plugging along. I imagine it'll exist, and there will be somebody. There's this gaping vacuum. I just got to feel somebody's going to jump into it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Everything really depends how the rest of this year and maybe a couple months into next year plays out. Like if you've heard, there's so many possible players coming into the mix, it seems like, right? We got to see how this Riyadh season plays out. At the end of the year, maybe Turk's like, you know what? WWE's easy to deal with. UFC's easy to deal with. You guys suck. You guys are a fucking nightmare. I'm going back over. Like, it could play out like that. Like, he might just be like, this is fucking crazy. Like, I have Eddie Hearn fucking calling me. I got Frank Warren. I got fucking Top Rank to deal with. Oscar. Like, he might just be like, this is too much. I don't need this as bad as you guys need me. Right? Like, we may end up there. Maybe we're left with, Dana White jumping in and making his move, which I'm not mad at either. There's so many ways this could play out. And it always, every couple of years, this whole landscape flips upside down, right? 7, 8 years ago, if you would have said HBO and Showtime are out, we would have hung up on you. We've been, this guy's crazy. We'll do this anymore. But here we are. Like, they're out. Who knows what ESPN is going to do next year? Who knows what DAZN's going to do? DAZN keeps kind of flipping the script on you a little bit, like investing in Misfits Boxing. They invested in Salida. Like, just have no fucking clue. But I think we will. I think a couple months into next year, there's going to be a little more stability.
And Dana White said something that I liked. One of the interviews he gave, he says, we're going to be like the television network. That's what we need. We need entities that are going to come along and be the television network, and then allow the fighters to earn their way into it. That would then put us in the position where those entities that become the television network, but then deliver through streaming or whatever else in whatever ways are going to be in the future. Those entities have to be there so that the grassroots can build talent again, and then filter that talent into that network. And I have faith, as does Joe, that will happen. It's just we can't tell you today who that's going to be. But certainly, if UFC, for example, Dana White, whatever, the whole group there, if that's something they want to do, they could be a very powerful force.
Well, thank you both, as always, for your time, for your insight. Good luck to you on October 12th and October 19th.